I must provide detailed information about my doctor's appointment to get approved for paid time off. Are you absolutely sure? Well, if you say so. A few years ago, I worked in an office with some pretty strange and crappy rules. One such rule was that while we could apply personal PTO, paid time off, for any reason, management needed a detailed summary of the reason before they would approve. This resulted in several instances of co-workers applying for PTO for things like funerals and birthdays and being told the current project deadline is more important than your niece's birthday, or do you really need to attend your mother's cousin's funeral? That doesn't sound pressing. It was a really toxic system that resulted in some turnover from co-workers who were sick of being held hostage over PTO. Furthermore, both the department manager and the HR manager needed to sign off on the PTO request, which resulted in some frustrating situations where one approved, but the other did not. It did not help that the HR manager was a dick. Pretty much the only time you could expect to be approved was for court dates and important medical appointments, but you still needed to provide details, even if it happened to be a very personal medical or legal situation. This does not strike me as legal, but sadly, this isn't the first time I've run into this working in Texas. One more bit of context. My department manager was also a jerk. Without going into too much detail, he was a power-tripping sloth who liked to harass women, like me. Let's call him Jerk, and the HR manager Dick. We all hated both of them. Onto the MC. I had an important appointment with my psychiatrist coming up. My meds for anxiety and PTSD were not cutting the mustard anymore and I was in a bad place mentally. I needed a med adjustment, so I took the soonest appointment available. Work would have to cope with a couple of hours without me. I submitted my PTO request to Jerk and Dick for approval. Given the intensely personal nature of the appointment, I left the details sparse. It was rejected. Both Jerk and Dick said in an email that I needed to give details about my appointment in accordance with company policy. Jerk had the nerve to call me into his office and chide me over my unacceptably terse PTO request. You know the rules. Why would you waste my time with such a brief request? You know I can't approve this, etc. I was pissed, but as I stewed in my cubicle, it dawned on me that I could get back at Jerk and Dick merely by complying with their own rules. I formulated a plan. I sent an email to Dick and CC'd Jerk. Always sire folks. I said, are you sure you need the details of my appointment? Are you positive? It's really personal. Both Dick and Jerk said yes. We need the details of your PTO circumstances. You know the rules. I replied that it's very private. Are you sure I need to talk about it? We sent some emails back and forth until I was sure I had a solid paper trail. Then I decided, well, if they really need my personal medical details, which I still think is illegal, but whatever, then I suppose I better give it to them. I submitted a new PTO request with all the relevant information. That I was going to see my psychiatrist for an urgent appointment. I needed to be seen at the earliest possible time because I was having thoughts of hurting myself, because I have PTSD from being raped in foster care. I threw in some details about what my foster father did to me, how I went numb and used drugs to cope, how I was hospitalized as a teenager for a suicide attempt. I also screenshotted and emailed my request to a few of the higher-ups, saying my previous request was insufficient, so I wanted to make sure I got it right this time. I submitted it. There were no snippy emails this time. Only approved appearing in green text to my request in the system maybe 4 minutes after I submitted it. I blissfully went about my day, happy to have my PTO. Curiously, neither Jerk nor Dick emerged from their offices. The fallout. When I showed up for work at 8 the following day, I was immediately called into the VP's office. One of the higher managers and a woman that I recognized from legal were also present. VP politely asked me to sit and kindly explain the grotesque email I had sent out yesterday. He was a polite but rather out of touch older gentleman, so I made myself clear I needed PTO for a very personal doctor's appointment, and my previous request was denied by both Jerk and Dick for being too brief, and Jerk even called me in his office to complain about my wasting his time. I didn't want to be rejected again, so I made sure my request was as detailed as possible. I also passed it on to management to verify that the level of detail was up to snuff when it came to corporate guidelines. And yes, I do have PTSD, it's all true, and they can reference my ADA paperwork and HR for more information. VP asked me a couple more brief questions. He then apologized for the hassle, said I was being credited some extra PTO for my trouble, and that the company would be reviewing its approach to the PTO approval process. I was then dismissed back to my desk. I received written apologies from Jerk and Dick that very morning, hand delivered by a tense and rather petrified Jerk. I think legal put him up to it. Both Jerk and Dick went out of their way to avoid me for the remainder of my time at the company, which was a blessing. The few times we were forced to interact, they spoke very quickly and looked desperate to end the conversation. I guess my PTO request was a little too intense for them. Whatever the case, it was the end of Jerk's little power trips, at least with me personally. Also that same morning, we received a company-wide email marked as important. There was a change in the PTO policy. Requests with regards to medical and other sensitive reasons no longer require detailed explanations, effective immediately. Bonus: one of my friends in HR, well, not really a friend, but a woman who liked to discuss crocheting with me at the water cooler, showed me an internal email from Dick to all HR staff. Every PTO request from me personally was to be approved immediately and without question. I tested this later that summer by requesting a day off to watch Netflix. That's specifically what I put in the request field. I planned on quitting soon, so I was in a flippant mood. It was approved immediately. I think they had me flagged in their system. Truth be told, I could have probably taken a whole month off and gotten paid for it, but I didn't push my luck. I left the company for a much more tolerable, less toxic, higher paying job about 6 months later, and yes, my appointment went well and I'm doing better now. I started attending a trauma support group, met my SO, and I've even been able to reduce the dose of one of my meds.